Hi, my name is Harley Yarbrough. This is my presentation for Native American Thought and Culture titled Echo, Native Cosmology Through Media and Disability. I will not be doing an episode-by-episode breakdown. However, I did want to start with acknowledging how in episode 1, the Choctaw creation myth takes center stage. This story is told to our main character, Maya Lopez, from her cousin, Bonnie, telling the story of Chafa and how she guided her family out of the cave to be the first family in the Choctaw Nation. And while Bonnie emphasizes the importance of family, Maya acknowledges Bonnie as her sister, to which Bonnie laughs off, restating it as, no, we're cousins. And Maya insists that they are sisters. Now, I thought this was an interesting example of how straight away we not only get the creation myth, but we also get the perspective on family within Native culture and Native cosmology, as direct family is acknowledged as being closer, sort of symbolizing the importance of how Native family is viewed within Native culture. Now, as this series is so new, I did include a lot of media articles online about the show. And so I decided to do a miniature literature review that I have titled my reception review. There are 3 different sites, one from a Native perspective, one from the perspective of people of color, and one from a white and Western perspective. And strangely enough, these 2 align very much with one another. The Native perspective did focus heavily on how the culture was positively portrayed, acknowledging the myths and how the representation was important, especially acknowledging how a mother of a deaf child who their family is Native, how much they were impacted by this show and how important the representation was. The Western perspective, strangely enough, was the most in-depth with describing how Native culture is portrayed through the show, going kind of episode by episode, and so I highly recommend that if you are looking into the representation aspect and not necessarily just the cosmology that I will be focusing on. And the other author of color took a far more critical approach, and during my research, I did look into how stereotypes exist within film and comics, how stereotypes of Native American people are presented in those. And so I do want to acknowledge, especially towards the end of the show, our main character, Maya, develops a sort of magical power that does sort of ostracize how Native cosmology and spirituality is viewed from a Western perspective. How what is essentially a religion and a spiritual practice, just like any other, is being framed as otherworldly and supernatural. And there are many negative connotations with this. However, interestingly enough, I found it very fascinating that the Native person, from their perspective, emphasized more of the positivity and avoided discussing any negative aspects. And so, sort of a historical perspective on this and looking into how what I believe to be the reasoning behind the Native perspective, we need to go take a step back. There is a silent film that features prominently Plains Indian Sign Language, which is an example of deaf gain, which is how cultures and communities can learn from their deaf community members within Native American cultures. Plains Indian Sign Language developed as a way to overcome language barriers across different Plains Indians tribes. And so I believe that this is important as it highlights intersectionality and how this relates to Native cosmology. The focus on community and understanding, not just within one tribe, but across many tribes, as well as an understanding and respecting of those who are disabled within your tribe and how you can learn and grow from them, shows how Native perspectives view everything as parts of a bigger whole. And focusing on the actress herself, who portrays Maya, Alakwa Cox, who is not only a Native American woman, but also deaf and an amputee. She is being heralded as providing so much representation for so many people. And so I believe she herself is a showcase of how someone who has an intersectional identity is very important to showcase Native philosophy, as all of these different aspects make her who she is, and this is a powerful cultural way for her to relate to the world. Now, originally Maya Lopez as a character was written by white authors within Marvel Comics. However, the show itself was written, produced, and directed by Native American people. And yes, there were actors, or not actors, I'm sorry. Well, there were actors, writers, and producers of different backgrounds, not just Native. However, storytelling is incredibly important to indigenous cultures, as it helps maintain tradition and maintain culture in terms of learning and growing. It is important for Native cultures to increase their storytelling for their community. And we see this in a modern lens within comics by Native people. And now Echo itself wasn't originally like that. However, the Marvel series does reclaim this character and push her forward as a means to convey Native perspectives and Native philosophy in who she is and the way she interacts with the world. Representation within the actors is not the only important factor. I have some questions here just for people to think on. I will be kind of touching on these questions, which is, why do we just have representation in film? Is it solely because of the actors, or is it because of the writers? And what exactly constitutes this, and why do we have this? If it's just the actors, is the storytelling itself a form of representation at that point, or are the actors just a method for someone else's story? I did briefly mention the silent film using Plains Indian Sign Language, and so I thought of, what are other examples that we can think of? Like, why is this such a small amount of people that are being shown in film and in TV? And then when we think of Native cosmology, why is this important for non-Natives? This media is a way for us to expand our perspective, and so when we only have writers who may give us stories featuring diverse people, are the stories themselves diverse? And is this actually helping us grow as individuals? So these are just some sort of thoughts to think of, as well as my closing thoughts. Intersectionality is a fundamental aspect to community, and therefore Native ecology and cosmology. Intersectionality does highlight how interconnected the world is, and that is such an important aspect of the way that Native culture connects to the world around it. Deaf culture and history interact with Indigenous culture and history in a rich way that impacts Native cosmology and philosophy. Deaf gain is very important to many cultures, including Native American cultures, and the specific way that deaf culture exists in the context of Plains Indian Sign Language is very important for us to see how aspects of community and family exist, especially within the Great Plains nations and tribes. And increasing representation for Native culture will hopefully lead to more Native productions to best spread their perspectives. It is not nearly enough for Native actors to be on screen. We also need Native writers, producers, and directors so as to better culturally communicate and explain the perspective that Natives have. And lastly, here is my works cited. A lot of these were indirectly referenced throughout my presentation. And thank you so much.